Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. My name is Matt Gardner for Beyond Recovery. My guest today is Starlyn Haneman, Wholesome Rebel Wellness. Starlyn, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you?
I am great, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're most welcome, and thank you for coming on. Yeah, I've just I think the last week or so, we've definitely been following each other on Instagram. I really like everything you have going on, so we're gonna get into that. And before we do, I always love the idea and the whole concept of having somebody, give their origin story. There's it's so important in addiction recovery, to provide some backstory. And it was, as far as my journeys went, like as soon as I got into a room where I was able to share my story and hear back and have it reflect back that like other people were going through the same thing, it was like instantaneous relief and progress that I made. So I think it's so important to be able to share each other's stories, recovery stories and such. So I'd love to start with that, and then we can go back as far as you'd like, whatever your childhood was, when you were first introduced to alcohol, just basically your origin story and your relationship with alcohol, and walk us up to, when you became sober and such. And I'll give you the floor. Take as long as you care to.
All right. Okay, so I guess as a kid, I was not around alcohol much. My dad was going after an engineering license, so he studied all the time, and so alcohol was not in my household. So it just wasn't a part of my life. I remember having a few experiences seeing some people that were very drunk out in public. It was the 80s, softball games, that sort of stuff. And I remember being horrified by it. So those were some early imprints I had from alcohol, but I wasn't around it to ever kind of get a feel. It wasn't like a part of our life. Fast forward to high school, and I was somewhat shy, I think. Like, I feel like I always felt shy, unsure of myself. I was a good student. But then, man, I got into high school and I met some people and they were a good time. And in order to feel like I fit in, like I just was really unsure of myself, like I said. So I started, hanging out with them, parties were happening. And then one night we went out and I drank a lot. And it was a bad situation, but man, it was really freeing. I felt so like I could just fit in. I felt like a part of the crowd, and it became a weekend thing. Every weekend we were finding the parties, we were going out. I was having a great time. School was starting to go downhill. I stopped doing sports, but I felt like I was a part of the crowd. Um, Now, and my sobriety, I've realized that it was a way for me to be an extrovert when I was actually an introvert. I felt it's weird how recovery really brings to light things once you get out of the suffering of being sober in the early stages and just trying to survive. Things start to open up, and I realize now that I was an introvert, and I just was so insecure that that's what I was doing. Back then, I thought I was just doing what you did in the late 90s, and that was party. Sometimes it meant partying on school grounds during school, going out and having screwdrivers. What? Who does that?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I'm terrified for my children. I'm hoping that things have changed since the 90s. Yeah, and then I went to school to be a motorcycle mechanic and got into working in a shop as a mechanic. And as you can assume, there's a lot of partying there. And so every night after getting off of work, it was go to the bars. Every weekend, I just learned that living with a hangover was part of it. And the best way to get over a hangover was to continue to drink. So drink off the hangover. That'll fix it. Yeah, so that went on for quite some time. I worked in the bike shop for 8 years or so, and then got married, and the partying slowed down. But then, I wound up having kids, and it went from being like partying to using alcohol to survive parenting. Kids aren't sleeping, I'm stressed out, it's been a long day. And I never got into, morning drinking or anything like that. It wasn't day drinking, but it was definitely like the kids triggered me and I'm going to crack a beer or 6 or more, or, so it just got to the point of where I was using it as a coping mechanism to get through parenting. And I woke up in 2019 to just an extreme amount of anxiety, and there was some depression. We had moved at one point. We wanted moving back to Colorado, but we had moved. I was really depressed, really anxious all the time. And the anxiety got to an all-time high where I went to a doctor and was like, I think I have an anxiety problem. I don't know if the drinking caused the anxiety or if maybe I've had anxiety increasingly throughout my life. I'm not sure because it's all kind of a blur. The doctor suggested, try meditating, try not drinking. These things are not as helpful as or easy as just drinking. But they did prescribe me some anxiety medication. And you should not mix those with alcohol, I learned. I tried the anxiety meds for a bit, and then I found out that they caused me to black out after a very small amount of drinking. So there was that. And then the low, I never had like that moment where I never wrapped my car around a telephone pole. I never had any like rock bottom moment like that. But the rock bottom moment for me was I was taking the anxiety meds. I didn't feel like they were doing a whole lot besides sort of making me feel less like myself, but there wasn't anything besides like, well, now I can't drink because I black out, which was kind of depressing because I wanted to drink. I really liked it. But I was going to a job interview, and this is very embarrassing. But here we are being vulnerable. So going to a job interview, and I felt a little gassy and I went up shirting my pants. So that was like, what just happened? You don't read the fine print on the back of those, the medications, you don't read it. Well, it turns out that's a side effect. So I went to a job interview.
Oh no.
Commando, because I pulled over, took care of it, went to the job interview. I got the job. I did get the job.
Wow.
And then that happened a second time, and I ended up kind of like, in a pool on the floor going, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
I would rather drink, take anxiety meds, and shit my pants, or maybe I should just sober up and get control of my life. And that moment, it was like, okay, I've got to make some changes. And I had started reading, Annie Grace, This Naked Mind, just out of curiosity, because when you Google a million times, like, do I have a drinking problem?
Yeah.
How do I know if I have a drinking problem? How much drinking is too much? When you're all consumed by the question of, do I have a drinking problem? You probably have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
If you're questioning it.
Yeah.
But I had started reading that book, and I just, like, one day woke up and was like, I think I'm done drinking today. And because I never identified with going to AA or like being a part of a group. I'm a very private person until telling this story, this sobriety has gotten me out of my own skin and caused me that it's taught me that vulnerability is part of the healing journey, I think.
Yeah.
Just sharing it with people.
Definitely.
So I just started taking slow steps, and one day after another, and I never really committed to quitting drinking. The idea of it terrified me. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my husband I was quitting drinking because I didn't know if I was. I just knew I wasn't drinking that day.
Right.
And after like a month, he's like, are you ever going to drink again? And I'm like, I don't know. And then after like 3 months, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to drink again. But I was afraid of telling people I wasn't drinking because that was my identity. I had been a party girl for, 20 plus years. That's how I was known. I was worried people would want to hang out with me. I was worried I would fail. Oh, I quit drinking and oh, now I'm drinking again. So I never really outwardly committed to it. And honestly, inwardly either. I just took it
Mm,
one day at a time. It
mhm.
was never in the beginning. And then once it was a commitment, it was just, this is my choice. And it was not a struggle at all. There was no counting days or things like that.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for, yeah, like you say, vulnerability being a key word there for sure. And it's like this, a sort of a life's analogy for, losing control, like the physicality of actually losing control from the combination of your, uh, alcohol consumption, habits with the medication that you were on too. It's just like, man, yeah, for sure. I could see where that would be like, okay, time to start making some changes here. Right. So, I appreciate the honesty and everything there. A few things I'm going to circle back to you. I just
Yeah.
jotted down a few notes. It sounds like we're raised in similar time frame. I'm assuming pretty close, on age and such. 90s culture for sure, man. Like looking back on it, it was like all about like it's so polar opposite of a lot of different things that's going on right now as far as like the whole 90s thing for me was being brash, like offending people was cool, right? Like Jackass. I know that was towards the end of the 90s, but you know what I mean? Even the music, like MTV, it was all about like attitude, right? And so for sure, yeah, like in high school, yeah, absolutely. It was about like offending people. And like if you show that you're easily offended, then it's like your prime target for more bullying and such, right? And peer pressure. And so I can definitely relate to that. More of a comment. I mean, if you want to riff on the 90s culture a bit, was that sort of your take on it as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was like if you weren't doing those things, then you weren't a part of the crowd. And if you weren't a
Yeah.
part of, it was, I mean, I guess I could have chosen a different route. I have lots of other friends that stayed and played sports and all those things, but I don't know. There was just, for me, just being a part of that and, just being a group of, I don't know, misfits was just,
Yeah.
it was
Yes.
fun. It was
Yeah.
fun. Like,
Right. Right. I get it. I get it. Especially, I think I get the impression that like you identify, we talk, I want to get into the whole idea of identity here. It's when we get into your coaching and such as well. But, I get the impression that you identified as that misfit, and that's sort of what manifested into like, the motorcycle culture and motorcycle mechanic and such. Is that sort of am I connecting dots that aren't there, or was that sort of what got you into that as well? That identity of being sort of a misfit and
well, I was raised around motorcycles. My parents have
Hmm,
Harleys, so I was raised around them. But my
gotcha.
dad's a pretty straight laced engineer. But in Hawaii, we lived in Hawaii for a while, and we ran with the club, and so I was around the biker culture, but it didn't. I don't know. As a kid, like it didn't set me up for like, oh, that's. And I'm not talking like if you watch Sons of Anarchy or anything like that.
Right,
Like
right.
I was not in, I was a kid, everything was like respectful. I mean, I was probably around things I didn't need to be around for sure. But
Mhm.
I don't think that guided me in any way. I mean, we went to church every Sunday. Like,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So it was kind of like a, I don't
yeah,
know, but riding bikes was like fun. And like still like riding motorcycles is like
yeah,
my release. Like I enjoy
yeah.
it. But when you're a motorcycle mechanic and you're in that, and that was early 2000s, working in a bike
Mm.
shop,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
it was making all the bad choices, all the wrong choices, drugs and alcohol. And
Yeah.
uh, it's almost like you had to like live up to like a certain, I don't know, standard of like you're a motorcycle mechanic in a
Yeah.
Harley shop. Like this is who you are.
Yeah.
And I fit into that and I did it well,
Mm.
but
Hmm.
to my detriment.
To your
Like,
debt. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that, and I relate to that. There's somewhat of a parallel, like for my story. Like I played in a lot of bands growing up, and that's like I always say, like bands is one of the few professions. Granted, I was like a hobby, but I was still getting paid to do it. That they would like encourage you to drink on the job. In fact, the booking
oh,
manager would be like, "Here, drink up before you go on and provide our entertainment for the evening." And I'm like, "Okay." When I'm like 21, I'm like, "Sounds good. I get to drink on the job. Perfect, right?" So there,
yeah.
there was like you say, there's like a little bit of a whether it's a social standard or I'm sure it was my own perception of, being a quote unquote rock star, or at least playing in a rock band, that I clearly I have to be also into drugs and alcohol and staying up late. And the other thing I want to mention, I wrote down, is like, I'm with you on what I believed was the cure for the hangover was just to have a few, the hair of the dog or whatever you say, dude. I
Yeah.
used that for years up until like pretty much the end of my drinking. I would still
Yep.
save a couple beers, you know, for the morning because I'd be a cripplingly hungover headache. And then I have a couple more just to, what I believed was like, would level me out. And then of course I'm just prolonging the inevitable anxiety that I get halfway through my workday or whatever it was. So yeah, when he said that, I was like, yeah, with you with
Yeah.
that, right? Just dreadful thinking back on it. But yeah, that was an interesting one too. And then finally, I just want to riff a little bit on just like the whole introvert thing, because I'm finding a lot of people that I talk to, this is a fairly common theme where people have used alcohol to quote unquote come out of their shell, or their perception of coming out of their shell. And then when they are in recovery, are recalibrating and realizing that they're introverts, and they're actually quite happy with that. And it's just like you kind of come full circle, and this thing that you're viewed as a weakness perhaps in early teenager, you know, when you're developing your social skills and such, that I personally was getting down on myself for, I champion that about myself now. Like I'm fine with solitude. I don't view it as like, I don't get lonely. I like my own company and so forth. So, but I had to do the full circle to come through that whole, like, trying to convince myself I'm an extrovert and using the social lubrication and such. So interesting that, you know, that you had the same experience. And I'm definitely, like I say, I'm definitely finding that a lot. So, yeah, same thing with you. Like, yeah, I guess what's your take on introverts, or if somebody that is hearing this and it's relating to that? Yeah, just some more of a conversation topic. I'd like to riff on that a little bit.
Yeah, introvert, when I was younger, like in high school and stuff, I don't know that I thought I identified as an extrovert. Like, oh, I have friends and all this stuff, but I wasn't paying attention to what I needed as far as like, taking care of myself. So I think now realizing that I am an introvert and how to care for myself, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have slowed down enough to listen to my needs when I was younger. But what teenagers doing that? I mean, maybe teenagers are doing that now. There's, mindfulness and meditation is so mainstream that maybe the teenagers are going to start slowing down and listening. But I never wanted to slow down and listen to myself. And I think as my drinking progressed, it was maybe I was afraid of what I would hear. you know, I would, I didn't want to hear those things. But as far as the introversion goes, like now I really enjoy not going out. I always thought I loved parties. Strangest thing. Thought I loved parties. Like I lived for a party. Where are the parties? I went to, and I got sober right before the pandemic. So it was kind of a beautiful break where nothing was happening. So I didn't have to go to barbecues. I didn't have to go to parties. I didn't have to do anything. So it really gave me this really good, like 1.5 2 year long break from people and like big gatherings. And this year I found myself at a couple parties, and man, I hated it. I hated it
Yeah.
so much. I was like, there's a bunch of people that some people I know, some people I don't know. I hate small talk. I've always hated small talk. I've never gone to a high school reunion because I just didn't want to feel like I was comparing my life to someone else's. What are my shortcomings? I, haven't done this and they have. I don't have that money. So I just found myself at these parties, and I'm, watch people do shots, and I don't really mind being around people that are drinking. Like I can go out to dinner with people and they have drinks. But when you're at a party and people are just drinking more and more, I'm like, God, like what a bunch of jackasses. or like
Yeah.
I don't, they're just, the talking gets sloppier and the actions get sloppier. And I'm like, I would rather be at home reading a book than watching people lose control. And yeah, I think just the last year, the first 2 years of not drinking, I feel like I was just trying to get through and find myself and find the ways that I could cope. and deal with anything that came up. And in this last year, it's like every day I discover something new about myself. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't like parties, or wait, I think I'm an introvert. Or like it's just every single day I'm like, oh, the universe is trying to teach me something, you know?
Mm.
Like right before our interview, I can't connect to the internet. Nothing's working. All my passwords seem to have changed. I'm like, what's happening? And I'm like, before I would have lost it. And now I'm like,
Mm.
oh, okay, what's the universe trying to teach me? Okay, just
Mm.
slow down, have patience. And so now, instead of taking every time something happens as an excuse to, I'm frustrated, let's have a drink, it's like, what am I trying to learn? What is the learning moment happening? Because that used to be, I'd get frustrated with something. I'm like, crack a beer, that'll fix it. That
Right.
that'll bring me down a notch.
Right.
And then it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I have a racing heart and mad anxiety. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, why did I do that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, great stuff. Great stuff. You're sort of touching on it here. I was going to actually ask you about like what has been some of the changes, sustainable changes that you've done in your sobriety. It was November 9th, 2019. Congratulations. Passed that a few months ago at time of recording here. Amazing. So you did mention there was I like this, the relationship with the universe. We'll go with that to start. Like, this pandemic, this gives you this pretty big chunk of time to pull yourself out of those parties and different habits that you were doing beforehand, right? What else worked for you at that time? I mean, you talk about on your, in your bio and on your Instagram and sites and such about finding sustainable ways to cope that don't involve the opening of a
Yeah.
beer,
Yes.
right? So what was working for you? What did you find has been working for you in these last 3 years and a bit?
you know, it was small changes because, like I mentioned, I didn't want to be quiet. I didn't want to sit still. I didn't want to hear what I had to say. But when I finally kind of made that decision, like things have to change, what helped me, and I started this before I actually completely went sober. Like I kind of started like my drinking, like I was like, okay, I can't really drink if I'm on this medicine because I'll black out. So it was like I was drinking less, but I was still drinking some. It was just like I'd go a few days without drinking, whereas before that almost never happened.
Mm.
Um, but I started writing in a gratitude journal every
Mm.
single night. I just got a composition notebook. It wasn't a fancy journal. It was like literally I had a composition notebook, and every night I would just write down 3 things that I was grateful for. And I just like started that slowly. And after a few weeks of doing that, I got the Calm app and started doing a meditation. And I had never wanted to do that because I hated sitting down. I hated being still and like letting myself just be.
Mm.
And it really helped me to like kind of just slow my body down and like my mind down and just exist rather than trying to always fix something or worry about something, or so it's all the stuff that is mainstream and everybody's talking about, but I gotta say it really works because I was working out, I ate well, I did all these things on the outside that while I was drinking, it was almost like a balancing act of, oh, well, if I can eat well and I can exercise every day, then it's okay if I drink.
Mm-hmm.
It was just to try and even it out. Well, I was, always, when you're drinking, you're not in the best shape. You've got you're just fluffier. I like to call it. Everything's kind of a little squishier.
Yeah.
And I was always kind of chasing that certain look. And when you stop drinking and you start doing these things, that sort of just comes. Like everything sort of just changes. You're
Mm-hmm.
not sucking down calories or going to the bar and eating fried pickles or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but I started using exercise rather than as a way to change my body. It was a way to like mentally survive. It was
Mm-hmm.
my mental health. Like it pushed me to do hard things. Like, okay, I can do a hard, uncomfortable thing every day. And it was more for my mind than it was for my body.
Yeah.
But my body benefited from it. But I just totally started looking at everything at a different perspective.
Yeah.
And uh, you know, I started walking like I don't know how many miles I put on, but it was like every day I was walking the dog like 3 miles at night,
Mm,
multiple times during the day. And it was like I just had to get out of the house and just go. And if
hmm.
I wasn't home, I didn't think about drinking. I wasn't triggered by anything. And if it was, a long day with the kids, it was like, okay, I've got this hour to myself with nothing but the dog and a sunset and whatever. And the walking was and still is a huge part of my day.
Very cool. And where are you based out of?
I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Oh, so you got some wonderful nature around, I'm sure,
Yeah.
some great
Yes.
trails, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that, I mean, that's such a healing experience too. I have a couple dogs, and that's like one of the pivotal points of my day is like when I can go out and we have a bunch of nature trails around here as well. So beautiful. Okay, so yeah, you're in quite a natural spot, which I imagine is fairly spiritual as well. Like being
Yeah.
close to mountains and such is just such an amazing experience. So to be close to that is, I imagine, has had a big help, and it sounds like it
Yes.
did. So
Yes.
yeah, well, let's get into like your coaching program. So by this point, whereabouts in this healing journey that you've been, I always look at it as like the hero's journey, right? Like, so you've gone through your own hero's journey. And one of the biggest parts of the hero's journey is coming back and then sharing and pulling some other people that were where you were, a year and a half, 2, 3 years ago, and helping them through their hero's journey. Right. So
Yeah.
where did that shift happen where you're like, you know what, I've done some great work on myself, I'm learning all this stuff about myself, I'm ready to share this and help other people? Where did that come from?
Well, it kind of was a mix of things. I have been 4 years working on a degree for food science and human nutrition because food fascinates me, nutrition, how food can heal our bodies.
Yeah.
Still working on that degree. But in the pandemic, I was feeling really stuck, and I was at a job that had nothing to do with motorcycles or anything. It was a wonderful job, but it was not motorcycle or food or anything related. Uh, but I was, at home with the kids during the day and trying to work nights and, just get through the pandemic best we could. And I was like, I really don't want to tell people what to eat, but I really want to help people live healthier lives. And at that point, I had zero uh, sights on helping people that had, were dealing with recovery or anything like that, or were considering any sort of sobriety. That was not what I was after. I just wanted people to, start using, food and exercise as medicine and not a way to like get your body to a certain way, but to like really heal your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and got my coaching certificate, and then just that took a year and started coaching people. And I've worked with a few people now, and none of it was ever about alcohol, but through me sharing my story, I've got some people that are like 6 months sober now that
Yeah.
like I'm just like, whoa. But only in the last couple months I was suddenly like, I think that helping mothers that are struggling with their relationship with alcohol, I think that might be the people that I'm supposed to help. I was
Gotcha.
just really avoiding that because I'm not sure like how it all fits together.
Mm,
Like I'm not like a sober coach in the sense of like I will help you get sober, but maybe I will help you bring all these other things into your life and we can discuss how alcohol is affecting you and kind of fill your life up with more things that can, you know, fill up your cup and help you learn to, cope with the difficulties of parenting rather than going to drinking. So I'm kind of really just finding myself in this new place with my coaching, whereas before it was, you know, eating and, maybe getting some exercise and meditating and making these changes. And now it's kind of through a different lens. It's still the same material. It's all still the
mm,
same stuff, but it's
hmm.
through a different lens of, you know, maybe looking at the alcohol side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it totally makes sense. I was going to ask you about just like, because you've had um bouts of anxiety and such, and I'm thinking the further into the interview that we're getting, I'm getting the impression we've pretty much answered this question, but just to hit a home run with it, like you with the anxiety. So I'm guessing I'm painting the picture that we painted so far is like removing alcohol, obviously big one. Secondly, just the idea of what food can be, food, what you put into your body really affects you. Like food can be medicine, food could be very just that this whole holistic approach. as well as the meditation, nature walks, and so forth. So I imagine that has a lot to sort of counterbalance or countermeasure the anxiety. I guess specifically when you're saying you're helping moms, like what is the sort of the advice that you can give with that day to day, challenges, we'll say, that come with with parenting, especially younger children, and having to put the children first and ahead of you. So yeah, hopefully that's a clear enough question. Just the
Yeah.
parental anxiety, I guess, is what I'm
Yeah.
leaning towards. Yeah.
I think my biggest thing is stop trying to do it perfect. There's
Ah,
no such thing as trying to do it perfect. And for me, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a people pleaser, and I have been so worried about what people would think. And that was another part of my drinking was, just to, I don't know, I just needed to fit into this mold. Um, Stop trying to be perfect. And the biggest way that I've made change in my own life, and what I really want to encourage anyone else out there is, it's like the sponge, kids are sponges sort of things,
yeah, yeah.
just like a sponge. It doesn't matter if you put them in clean water or dirty water, they are going to soak it up. And
I
whatever
like that.
environment you put those kids into, they're going to soak it up. You cannot go off of the do as I say, not as I do
Yeah.
mentality, because that will never work. So I started looking at, like, I have 2 little girls, and I was like, do I want my little girls to suffer with anxiety? Do I want them to worry about being perfect? Do I want them to be martyrs in their life? Do I want them to get so in over their heads with people pleasing that they turn to alcohol to
Mm,
survive? And I'm
hmm
like,
hmm
no, I don't want that. Okay, what is the behavior that I need to model? Okay, I want my kids to use exercise and walking and meditation as a coping mechanism. That's how you cope, is you do
Mm,
the things that fill you up and make you feel good in the long term, not they make you feel good for 10 minutes, then you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with anxiety. That's not feeling good. That's just killing the pain temporarily. But how can you actually slow down and listen to what you need?
mm,
So I guess I would just tell parents to, like, take it one step at a time, find one single thing every day that you can do that gives you what you need. And for everybody, that's different. There's no one size fits all model to
mhm.
a healthy, like, mental health thing. There's components that, where do you find your happy spot?
Mhm.
It could be hiking in the mountains. It could be going for a bike ride. I don't like riding bikes. That's
Yeah.
not where I'm going to find my happy
Yeah.
place. But moving your body, like, that's a huge thing. So find
Mhm.
a way to move your body, like, find a way to slow down and listen to what you need. Because I find
Mhm.
that when I get my anxiety, I'm not listening to what I need. I've gone out of my
Mm,
boundaries
mhm.
of, like, I've said yes to something that I did not want to say yes to.
Yeah.
I've done something I did not want to do. And I'm like, okay, so now I use anxiety as like a guidepost. Like, I'm like, okay,
Mm,
where did I step out of what I am capable of doing,
mhm.
like mentally or physically? Where did I go out of the boundaries? And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, next time I need to say no to that, because I don't like how it makes me feel.
Definitely. Okay. One thing that does come up, I love that idea of like using anxiety as like, road sign or a sign puller, however you worded it. Where does it come in where it's like, where is like the nuance or like the differentiation between, getting out of your comfort zone, for example? So like if anxiety accompanies putting yourself out there a little bit more or, stretching yourself, how do you know, how can you differentiate between, okay, this is me getting out of my comfort zone, or this is something that I don't want to do, this is anxiety? How do you differentiate between the two?
I think I usually look at it as, is this something that could potentially help me grow? Like,
Yeah.
is this something, in this process, I've started getting out of my comfort zone. Posting reels on Instagram, horrifying. Telling a very personal story about shitting
Right.
my pants,
Yeah, right.
terrifying. Um,
Gotcha. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
will it help me grow? Can I help someone with this? Yes.
Gotcha.
Right? People aren't
Okay.
talking about these things. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, yes, but could it potentially help me? Now,
Yes.
if it's something that I am saying yes to, yes, I can help this person do this person do this, I'll go take the kid to this thing. And all of a sudden I'm like, I have just said yes to all these things.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I can't meet all these expectations, but
Right.
I'm still going to try to, because I'm a people pleaser. And then I start to feel like that buzz of like not in
yeah,
control.
yeah.
That's when I know it's anxiety versus I'm just doing something that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
part of my recovery has like been doing uncomfortable things
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and not having to numb out.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm gonna do the uncomfortable thing and I'm gonna sit in it and then go, oh, it didn't kill me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm okay.
And
Here I am.
there's the growth, there's
Yeah.
the confidence and so forth. Really great answer. Yeah, thanks. I want to get into it because we've mentioned people pleasing. I can definitely relate to this as well. I think people that I don't know. I'm seeing it in my patterns as like being introverted, the way that I was able to, get into groups of people or that sort of thing. I use people pleasing. So definitely see that. I can take that in there. So how, and this seems to be $1 million question. It's like, how can you take care of yourself? When does self-care become a priority without this like layer of guilt that like you're being selfish or that you're that you're not helping anybody, right? Like I have a few good answers that I've had from this, but this is like fairly recent development for me. I always viewed it as like take care of somebody else first. Like I can wait, right? Especially in different managerial roles that I've done. It's like, well, I'm going to take this on. This is up to me to like absorb all this and take it. And I can process it later when I go home or, you know what I mean? Not realizing that like, if I, fill my own cup, then I'm going to be so much more effective. So this has been something that was like, I've been spent a lot of time in finding kind of where the nuance is. So where is it for you? Like if you were used to being a people pleaser, how did you navigate like the self-talk with that, as far as like, oh no, like this is selfish behavior on my end and I'm supposed to be taking care of all these people? How do you navigate that? And get through that in your head?
Well, I finally realized that if I was not doing what I needed to do to take care of myself, then I was kind of an asshole. Like I would snap at people. And that's
Oh,
kind of one of the things I notice is like I snap more at my kids. Since I quit drinking and I started taking care of myself, I don't yell anymore. I used to be a yeller because I was just like always on edge. And
okay.
so I would yell at the kids
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I was anxious and unhappy with myself. And so it went outward. So I finally realized, okay, to be a better parent, to be a better person,
Mm,
and not snap at people and not lose it, I need to do these things. And I found that I've always been a morning person, even when I was drinking, which was terrible, but that's how it was.
mm-hmm,
I like being up in the mornings. And so my thing is I get up every morning and I work out and I don't have to force myself to do it. I just know that I feel better
mm-hmm,
if I do it. So I get
mm-hmm.
up and every morning I write in a journal and I work out and I meditate. And then the kids get up and we get ready for school. If I
Mm,
don't do those things, if for whatever reason I like, I think I'll just lay in bed. And this happens every so often. It happens less and less now because I notice I get really anxious, grumpy, and I'm upset with myself, which then goes external. And I snap at the kids. And I'm like, I am snapping at people because I didn't take care of myself. This
mm,
is stupid. So
mm-hmm.
I decided it's not selfish. If I want to treat people how I want to be treated, and I want my
Right.
kids to speak to people in a kind manner, I need to be modeling that. And how do I
Yeah.
model it?
Yeah.
Take care of myself. But
Yeah.
I do it first thing in the morning, so no excuses can happen. Like I can't be like, oh well, I got stuck in traffic or something came up. Get it done first thing in the morning, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, I'm already at that line, and then I can only improve from there. Like I can
Yeah.
add more things, I
Yeah.
can go for a walk, I can do those things, but I've at least met like my minimum requirements for the day for
Yeah.
like the best start possible. And if I'm
Yeah.
not yelling at my kids, then I think that's like the biggest number one like way to be like, it's not selfish.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Like
Yep.
not taking care of myself and drinking and yelling at my kids, that sounds pretty selfish to me.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, okay. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Another great answer for sure. I really like the idea of like, and we have similars. Like I do the morning routine. I have a similar mindset as far as like, man, the physical, like what physical activity brings to mental health. I clued into that right away. Like when I sobered up, I started, I know some groups say like, don't replace one And I get it. Like, I don't replace one habit with another, because then you're still bypassing the whole reason you have an addict. I get that. But I'm also quite confident to say that going to the gym is a lot more healthy than going to the bar, right? So it was my initial just, okay, let's change this habit initially, and then I can work on, the why I had this in the first place. So that was one of my first big indicators, is like, I was on the right path, is like, holy shit, going to the gym just did wonders for my brain. And I was getting similar, brain chemistry interactions that I would get on like that first 30 seconds of a beer. And then of course it plummets after that. But I was like, oh, I get the sustained feeling of like, oh, this is good. I'm liking this. So I definitely relate to what you're saying about the like the mental health side of physical activity, which is great. So I definitely relate to that. I love that morning routine. I always, it's worked great for me, just getting up that little bit extra early, which can be more challenging when it's like darker, like it is in the winter time. But like you say, no excuses. You get up, just from evidence, there's so much evidence in your brain, in your body, that you will have a much better day if you just get up that hour earlier. And I just love how you articulated the difference, that it's like taking care of yourself makes, and it's actually selfish for you to stay in bed and then lash out at everybody. So yeah, great. I love that. Okay. And then just, as we wind down the interview, thank you so much again for coming on today, Starlyn. And I love what you got going on. I want to give you an opportunity. What kind of, coaching programs, or like, whatever you got going on, as far as if somebody wanted to reach out to you and ask you about Wholesome Rebel Wellness?
Yeah. So I have a 12-week weekly program. It's a one-on-one coaching program. And we just kind of work on, mindset, accountability, making a plan, and everybody's different on what they want to focus on. So this is all individually, tailored to you. I've got like a basic framework, and then we just kind of work, because, some people are already like, I got the exercise side of things. I just need help implementing these other things, or I want to remove this. And so we just work on a lot of habit changing, behavior change. But yeah, it's a 12-week program, and you can find me at either wholesomerebelwellness.com or on Instagram at Wholesome Rebel Wellness. And yeah.
Fantastic. And, the last topic I want to get into, I foreshadowing earlier, just the whole thing of identity, and it's like, it's such a big part in everybody's life. I know that you've mentioned a few different things, with the identity of working at the as a biker mechanic, and the party atmosphere that kind of comes along with that, and how you're identifying with yourself now, and how big that is. So if somebody's out there listening, it's a little bit more confused about that, how do you come across that, or how do you like reconcile, or if somebody's a little bit lost in the muck, so to speak, what are some of the the foundational things that you teach, or that you learned about yourself, that can really point to like creating and cultivating this healthy identity that's more like conscious, as opposed to the subconscious? Well, I guess everybody else is doing it, kind of going along with a crowd, or it's been modeled for you, so you just go along with it. How do you go about changing that?
I think it's finding what resonates with you, to really, create like your way of like how you want to move forward. But as far as like identity, like if you're struggling with like, I identify as this, how do I go from being a, fun loving party person to someone who's taking care of myself with, because you do get people that are like, why are you doing this? Or I still get people that say, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I've been 3 years sober. And they go, I'm sorry. And I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah. Right.
You have people that have these reactions, and I just keep looking back and thinking, okay, that's on them. They're just dealing with their own stuff, and I'm not going to let it affect me. Just standing in the knowledge that internally what's best for you. If you slow down enough to actually listen to your mind and your body, it will tell you what you need. If you're questioning, do I drink too much? You probably are. Like you have the answers inside of you. Just slow down and listen to them, and stop looking at what everyone else is doing. Like that is so overwhelming that if you start trying to, I'm going to write in my journal 1 hour every morning and go to the gym for an hour, and you start trying to do, I'm going to change everything in my life, you're going to crash and burn and end up back on the couch with a 6-pack of beer.
Right.
Like, if you are struggling to make those changes, just find one small thing and just add it into your life. And slowly, by adding all these things in, other things that aren't benefiting you will kind of push out, like, just naturally, by just adding in those things that make you feel better. You'll start doing them. If you start exercising more, there's science behind this. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but if you start exercising more, you naturally will start eating healthier. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
It's like you're making these small good choices, and it just has a ripple effect throughout your whole life. But don't try and change everything, because more likely than not, you're gonna fail, or you're gonna feel like you failed.
Right.
And I think the big thing is stop looking at everything as a failure, and just start looking at as the mistakes are just learning moments. So this was too much. Okay, how can I do this without tripping up? What's like one smaller thing? Like, just take a big picture and break it down into little tiny things, and slowly you will be able to build and change. And all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're like, who am I? Like, I had this moment last night. I was like, I've been on a couple podcasts in the last week. I'm on podcasts. Like, these things have happened, but it's like, I hate my voice. I don't like being recorded. I don't like being filmed. I've gone from being this person that was, terrified of who they were and showing the world who they were and hiding behind alcohol, to suddenly being okay being filmed and recorded and speaking my truth. And it's like, who am I? This didn't happen overnight. This happened over a really long time of healing.
Right. I love it. I love it. One last thing I want to just because it has come up a few times, and it's worth repeating as sort of final topic of conversation here is, that's those small habits, right? So there's a great book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, like, Atomic Habits.
Yep.
And it's so good. Like, I highly recommend it. It's been brought up, as you can imagine, many different times from many different guests, for good reason. It's an amazing book, and it's all about that. And I totally agree with you. Is like or even, like, I think it's like a Japanese term, Kaizen, where it's just like small incremental improvements every day. So there's consistency, they're small, they're achievable. And before you know it, like, you'll start seeing that really ramp up. And it's so I love that. And, you'd mentioned it a few times. So I really felt to be a good thing to sort of end off on is, absolutely. Those small incremental improvements, they accumulate over a long time period. And to your point, before you know it, you're like, whoa, like, what just happened? Right. As opposed to doing this. And what you brought up earlier in the interview is like the perfectionism. I think you brought it in context of parenting, like, throw that out the window, right? Because that is this standard. And same thing, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the trying to change everything. It's just this massive bar. Great that you have this intention, but the process is so flawed. It's just going to be, you're going to fall on your face in a way that you're not going to want to get back up. Like, you visually put the person back on the couch with the 6-pack, right? So great
be
stuff.
Consistent. Be consistent. Like, consistency over perfection, and you will get so much further. It's going to take you time, but here's the thing. This is somebody told me this years ago, because I was like, man, I'm probably not going to, like, graduate till, like, with my degree till I'm 45. They're like, yeah, but you're going to be 45 anyways. So you're going to be 45 with a degree or 45 without a degree.
Ooh, that's
so
great.
It was like, that is like one of the things that I use throughout my life is like, okay, it might take me 6 months to get to this point, but that 6 months is going to pass whether I put in the work or not. So do I want to put in a little bit of work every day, see some sort of payout, or just let 6 months pass and then have regrets that I didn't make that move?
Right.
The time's going to pass. Just start doing
Regardless.
small things. Regardless. Stop trying to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. Just make one choice of, like, whatever it is you want to do.
For sure. And that's so important, because, like, there's a lot of people that want that change now, the instant gratification. So this is it's okay. So it'd be like the equivalent of, like, the Warren Buffett style investing, invest whatever, $10, over this long enough timeline. It's like the set it, forget it, just put it in there. And then there's the other polar opposite of the day trader that's trying to like read the
Yeah.
market and like, wait for
Yeah.
that big, you know what I mean? So
You
it's
just
kind of
gotta
the right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's just that different mentality, and the consistency, I think, is that key word, right?
yeah.
Consistency, and I think that's what keeps you more present minded. I'm assuming is that, that'll be my final question, I promise, is like, does that keep you more present minded as well? Just knowing that, okay, this is my little piece that I'm doing today. This is my conscious choice. I'm working on this little thing today. The big picture is still, it's in there, but this is what I am doing today. And this is what will change. Is that
Yeah, and I'm a creature of habits. I love routine. I love habits. And so if I know I have these things that work for me, I like doing every now and then I'll try and add in something else or change something up. And so it does morph and change in like what I do, but it's that consistency and knowing that this is how I've gotten the results. But you've got to stick with something long enough to find it out. You can't be like, I tried meditating for a week and it changed nothing in my life.
right?
It's a practice. It's just
Yes.
keep doing it. And I think I wrote my gratitude journal for like a year before I was like, oh, this is actually changing my brain and how I'm like seeing things. But it was a
Yeah.
year of like I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do this thing where I appreciate the things in my life. And some days I had nothing to appreciate, like that I felt like I was like,
Right.
I'm thankful for tap water that I can turn on.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like it was like, I am
Yeah.
thankful for toothpaste. Like
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
smallest things, but it was like,
Yeah.
what are the things that I can appreciate? And then it was like it started to bring forward more things of like, oh, okay, even if it was like that tap water was too warm, or I don't know, there's just things like where
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, last night I didn't sleep great, but I'm like, but I'm thankful that I have a bed to sleep in.
Yes.
So it's like, don't focus on the negative, focus
Yeah.
on the positive. Like, just be consistent with that. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, one day you're like, oh, okay, people are so instant gratification. Netflix. I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful that we grew up in a time where you didn't have instant gratification because our brains still can find that. I feel bad for the younger generation where they've had all this instant. Everything's instant. They can
Yeah.
get whatever they want
Yeah.
without having to wait.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm thankful that I have that ability. But as we progress in our society, it's like everything's now, 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 now.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to slow down and be like, you've
Yeah.
got to work for some things.
For sure.
You
You
have to work for the things that matter.
Yep. There's something to be said, like anticipation is powerful. Anticipation for me was like, as a kid, when I was anticipating whatever, a movie coming out or something, that really engaged my imagination, and it built up this like, oh, I can't wait for this. And regardless if it like, hit the mark of what I built it up to be or not, and that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I miss that. I do miss, it still shows up in some aspects of my life, like waiting for a holiday or something. But yeah, to your point, there is like, even just like small things like a CD release or a movie release, and having to go the ritual of having to
Mhm.
go to the movie store and hope that it's in or
Yeah.
reserve it. And yeah, anticipation. There's like, that's
Yeah.
that's definitely missing. It's a really good point. That sounds like a whole like part two that we could do.
Right.
Have you back on here. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Great
Yes.
conversation. All the best to you. And I will, that's already been 10 minutes since you gave your information where we could find you. I will have it all in the show notes. So
All
anybody
right.
that's was like scanning to the end to find how to find you, it will be in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen. Starlyn, thank you so much for coming on today. And I'd love to have you on sometime in the future as well.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.